This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, true seekers and true crime junkies. Welcome back to another episode of Hit the Road Jack, Finding the Zodiac. I'd like to welcome to the show today, Harriet Suchet.
Good morning. And
good morning.
As they call it. Yay.
Happy homing. I'm all happy homing. Yeah. You're home. We're so excited.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, at least home for Easter. I'm going to go get some Easter candy.
What was it, 6 months?
Yeah.
6 months you've been basically hospitalized?
Yeah, 4 months, and I'm still healing, but at least I'm healing the rest of the way in a home setting.
So right.
They released me because I was getting up and walking around and still complaining about the food. And, I think she's pretty much good to go. Because
right, send the complainer home.
They weren't expecting. Yeah, that's funny. Home, and what I'm just going to be really brief. What happened to me, which is including a cerebral hematoma, it really enhanced my sense of smell, and I could smell everything, and it ended up in the friggin' food, and I couldn't eat the food. Plus the medicines I was taking, I lost 40 pounds.
Nice, crash diet.
It's not the way you want to lose it. But
no,
they said, no, you need some weight back so you can heal more. And I only said it once, and then stop serving the shitty food. Anyways, so I'm home. Okay.
I think that's a topic for a whole nother podcast. But Western medicine and their food is absolutely horrible. But
yeah. I was making my own peanut butter sandwiches, and they said, she's making her own stuff to eat. Again, she's ready. Okay.
Right. Send her home.
And take care of yourself at home.
Well, congratulations. I'm excited for you.
Okay.
It's got to be nice to enjoy. Well, you were only in your place a couple weeks, right, before this accident happened?
Exactly. And then I had just decorated for Christmas, so I came home to frozen time Christmas.
Well, that's got to kind of make you smile a little.
Oh, I love Christmas.
Right.
So my family said, well, since you missed your birthday and other family members' birthday, missed Christmas, and now you're there for Easter, celebrate all those 4 things at once. I said, that's good for me. I'm getting candy because I couldn't serve candy at the store, at the place I was at. I haven't had candy in 4 months, really.
Right.
Anyways.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Well, last week we left off on what we refer to as the Sandy Betts murder map. And I know, I'm not sure how many people were with us for the episodes that I ran with Sandy Betts. She believes she was being stalked by the group or the individual Zodiac killer himself. She had many pieces of evidence to put forward, and some she knew where it came from, some she didn't know where it came from. And she also provided me with a couple of different prospects that she thought were possible suspects for having written some of these items. So I thought I was going to take a look at this handwriting finally, which is something I promised to do way back then. I hadn't had the time to do it, but I've now compared this handwriting to her couple of suspects, one of the suspects that Tom Voight has, and then I ended up actually comparing the handwriting itself to Sandy Betts, and things got extremely interesting. So when we look at this map right now, we can see it, on the outset, what might appear to be a whole bunch of zodiac symbols, but I'm going to comment on those because these symbols are not like what the zodiac wrote, because the actual lines never exceed the outside circumference of the circle. In some cases, there's a slight overhang, but for the most part, the crisscross is all inside the circle, and that is just not typically what we saw the zodiac actually executing. Another thing that kind of caught me off guard is we had multiple capital letters in the middle of lowercase printing. Now, I know that the zodiac would typically write or attempt to write all in lowercase print, but there was an occasional capital N that looked like a W structure in his writing, where you could see that he was either manic or on drugs, or he had something going on. So he was accidentally dropping these W-shaped capital letter N's in the middle of lowercase printing. And I found a few of those in the zodiac communications, but we didn't really, other than the K in speaking, did we see any other large capital letters, or what we call pop-out letters, in graphology. On this particular map, though, I took note to many pop-up letters. So we had capital A's, capital N's, capital R's, capital F's, capital L's. Was a K? Yeah, I would say they're pop-up Ks, larger Ks than the lowercase printing as well. So there was a lot of these pop-up letters, and we can see them like in the word Pleasanton here. We see this great big huge capital L. I want to say up in Vacaville, again, we have these capital L's. Fairfield is one word, but we see this capital F in the middle. Let's see, San Rafael, where did I see you? Up here, again, we have a capital F in the middle of lowercase, well, two capital A's around the capital F, but then we have a lowercase e, and then we have that pop-up capital letter L again. So all of this being that interesting to me, I wanted to see how this fared out with some of the suspects. So I did do a comparison with Bob Hernandez's handwriting, or Robert Hernandez, which I believe that this is the main suspect that Sandy Betts believes is either A, the Zodiac killer, part of the group, or her stalker. I'm not really sure because I get myself confused. She's got a couple different things going on. But when I did the comparison here, I looked at these letter A's, and they're very tall, very pointy, crossed very low on the crossbar, and it's pretty consistent. When he writes in his lowercase handwriting with proper capitalization, we don't see any capital A's, capital N's, capital A, A's or N's. Let's see, no capital R's. So, let me see if I find any K's around here for him. I don't believe I did, but we can see here that when he prints with proper capitalization and lowercase letters. So that kind of rules him out. When he prints in capital letters, all of those capital letters, each letter is capitalized. So as he wrote Hernandez, Kendo, some type of a self-defense school, he wrote all of this in capital letters. So he either writes in all caps when he writes, or he is using proper capitalization and lowercase print. So then when we looked at the form and style of the actual letters, again, we didn't find any consistencies in the letter R's or the letter N's. The letter A's were obviously very different. Most everything that I saw in here, I got no warm and fuzzy off this guy whatsoever. There was nothing that made me think that this guy actively wrote this map. Which then brings us to I have more handwriting from Bob Hernandez. And again, we are looking at his writing here. Again, he is writing in proper capitalization form with lowercase letters, and we do not see any pop-up capital letters in this writing. And again, the form across the board is not consistent with what we see going on. In fact, we had the Imperial Dragons written up here, and we've got this letter D. We can see how that varies from the letter D's that are in here in Mount Diablo and Danville. Again, just nothing there that hit home for me that said, ooh, we've got something that's alike. His capital F's, as he wrote in February, he tends to cross all the way through that stem instead of just coming off the right-hand side of it. And we can see that that's not what's happening with the letter F's in this actual murder map. Now, that brings us to Gaikowski, which is one of Tom Voigt's suspects, but I think that sometimes Sandy Betts believes that there's a possibility he could also be the Zodiac. So I had thrown some of his writing in here to just kind of take a look at it. once again, we had some of the same characteristics. We have complete capitalization, proper capitalization with lowercase printing. We do not have any pop-up letters that are not specific to the actual writing that's going on. Again, we have these F's that are crossed through the stem, just like we saw in Bob Hernandez's handwriting, only Gaikowski tends to have a little bit more flair to it, so you can actually see the stem protruding from the top of the F in Darlene Ferrin. We can see the middle crossbar crosses from left to right in an inclined fashion, so does the top crossbar. And in San Francisco, pretty much the same thing. We can see both the crossbar at the top and the crossbar in the center that is crisscrossing all the way through from left to right of that stem. So when I did any comparison on actual letter formations, again, I did not see a lot going on here. I did see in, in the word Fairfield, the attempt to use this bel tape that looks extremely rudimentary. It does not really look like anything that we saw the Zodiac do. We do see that Gaikowski does have that bel tape, at least one in San Francisco, but again, it's not even the same shape or style or form as the bel tapes that we're finding over here. So occasionally, when I look through these words, we'll see these bel tapes almost as if the person is just attempting to mimic or put them in, while the rest of them, they just didn't pay attention to the fact that they were using all capital A's.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
You remember you brought up of Gaikowski. Once Tom Voigt said it's the Zodiac because of Gaik. That's when he started getting laughed off the internet. So, you're bringing back some funny, fond memories of saying, yeah, finally people are just laughing at Tom Voigt.
Well, I mean,
it was a real reach, you know?
Yeah, a huge reach. I mean, when you see the picture of Gaikowski, you know that once again, he's just not even a similar match. He's just not even a match at all, like between the composite from the Presidio. So again, once I cross-reference this particular handwriting, and of course, this is a little bit more cursive, so it's a little harder to actually make some comparative values, but we do have other letters in there that we can use and make cross-references to. So things like the capital letter S, which is a standout print, and the word San Francisco, the word killing. It looks like he wrote rich. I have killed dozen people. And of course, this is a sample of Richard Gaikowski's handwriting that was apparently obtained by authorities during the investigation regarding the complaints by Darlene Ferrin's sister, Pam. So we have someone else who is evidently complaining about Gaikowski. I'm not sure. It says this sample contains the numbers 187 and letters TR during her appearance on the Sally Jesse Raphael show. So Pam's sister must have been on a show. She must have called him out, or somebody would have fed her that information to even look towards Gaikowski. I'm not sure how she got involved with blaming him. Do you, Harriet? You know any backstory?
All I know is he was definitely being, even though it's horrible, you know, because there are real people killed, they were just laughing about Richard Gaikowski being it. And if you got somebody who's supposed to be Darlene Ferrin's sister saying it's not it, you know, it just, Tom Voigt apparently.
No, it says here, it says here that his handwriting apparently was obtained by authorities during the investigation regarding the complaints by Darlene Ferrin's sister, Pam. So Pam had to have complained about him, and then they obtained his handwriting sample. And by the looks of it, they didn't find that anything matched, or we'd have seen him hemmed up.
They found nothing.
Yeah.
I think I remember something about the Sally Jesse Raphael show.
Yeah, it's pretty much what I found was nothing.
Well, Tom Voigt was grasping at straws trying to find a suspect to keep his ZodiacKiller.com alive, because at that time that Arthur Lee Allen, the prime suspect, the DNA didn't match, the handwriting never matched, a lot of it didn't match, and so he's just, you know, he's the snake oil salesman of the Zodiac world, trying to keep suspects alive to keep his site going.
Fancy that, because I think that's what he called me.
Yeah.
Snake oil salesman. It was him or Chris Yarborough. There's been so many trolls throughout that I've even forgotten about some of them. But I think Chris Yarborough was the one that said I was smoking and snake oil salesperson. Thank you. I could probably sell ketchup on a stick, but
he's the only one that apologized. At least somebody using that name to Dennis for what they put him through. Upon Dennis's death, I saw it on Facebook. So at least that was nice. But that, we've been through it because of
yes, we have.
So
it has been a long 16 years that I've been involved in this, and I think you were involved a little bit longer than I was. So
a lot longer, and I was quiet during a lot of the 2000s, but I kept on lurking. And I still, at the time and during the 2000s, was backing Kenny Kilgore quietly because every time you supported Kenny Kilgore on Tomboys or any of the sites, you got the crap beat out of you and you were suspended for a couple of days.
Now, Kenny Kilgore,
he's saying that the FBI, he had proof that they were backing his stepfather as the Zodiac. He kept on posting it, and that was removed too.
Now, Kenny Kilgore turned out to be Dennis Kaufman, though, correct? Incognito?
Yeah. And so I was like, when I finally found his site, I says, oh, my God, I think I found the right person to support him back. I didn't want to just have a suspect and throw out the name. I wanted to really solve it.
Yeah, so, I sat back for a while incognito as well on his message board, just to kind of get information from individuals before they figured out who I was. And then, of course, once they figured out who I was, then the onslaught was on. I think even at one point in time, I had moderated Dennis's message board for him, kicking off all of the trolls and getting rid of the people who were just basically there to, cause drama in the middle of real information that people was seeking. So another one of the
was probably hundreds you blocked.
Probably. Yeah, I went to town.
Yeah,
if you were rude, if you were a jerk, you were out of there. Well, and I think that a lot of these trolls that were on the internet were signing up for multiple accounts. So sometimes I could literally read the messages that they were giving and see that was literally, okay, this is the same person under a different name. Of course, again, incognito. Nobody wants to be out there with their name on anything, because if they're going to be jackwagons, they don't want to be known that it's them that's doing it, which was not something that I appreciated at all. If you're going to come at us for real, and come at us as the person you are, not as some covered up individual, which can't be found or asked to stand up and raise your hand and say that you believe the things that you believe.
Didn't you block like one ISP that would be like 10 or 20 bots, as they call them now? So you block one ISP and then we clean up the whole board for a while.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. We were able to actually go in there and plot out that information. Nobody wants to read through all the garbage just to sift through 30, 40 different bad messages just to get a little piece of some type of evidence. We wanted the evidence to be straightforward and clear and discussed, and something that people could follow easily without all the drama and the nastiness in between. Well, enough on that. I do have some other handwriting from.
I just wanted to say something really quick. Now that I'm seeing stuff that's been going on for maybe a couple of centuries and it's still continuing, we still have the same sort of types of people who just don't want the truth out there.
You mean decades? Or I guess you are.
Yeah, okay, I'm talking about centuries now, because the stuff I'm doing right now is going back a couple of centuries.
But we're not covering that though. So basically, Richard Gaikowski had another piece of information out there, which was a request for a passport, in which case his handwriting was found on. When we look at this handwriting, we can once again look across and see that there's just no comparative value between the actual letter forms and structures, size, shape. Again, he's using proper capitalization with lowercase printing, no pop-up letters. Even his Ks tend to look more like a lowercase K, although Dakota looks a little bit bigger here. When we look at Gaikowski up here, it is definitely formed as a lowercase K. And then again, cross-comparing that to the information on the map, there was just really nothing that was kind of giving me a warm and fuzzy again, even with this particular handwriting. So I've looked at different handwritings over different time frames. I want to say this one was in the 90s or something like that, for the passport. And then the other one was at some point in time during the actual investigation of the Zodiac killer way back when. That brings us actually to the commonalities that I found in some of the communications that Sandy Betts had indicated she had received. So she stated she received a message that says, "Why am I afraid to tell you who I am?" She also received another message she believed from somebody who stated that they were some type of a, astrologist, basically giving her astrology reading. So it says, "Secretive, mysterious, extremely brilliant. You are active, hardworking, and aggressive. You are sensitive to the needs of others. You are a quiet fighter. You are a slow starter, but once you get going, look out." When I cross-compared these three communications, which included the actual map, murder map from Sandy Betts, I did find some consistencies. Between the one that she claimed came from an individual who was giving her an astrology reading, we see these backwards Ys. We see this backwards Y also in the "Why am I afraid to tell you who I am?" Now, in the word "why," we see that the Y is actually created correctly. So this persona of doing this backwards Y is obviously somebody manipulating their handwriting. I don't know why that this was even a thing, because you're not going to find backwards Ys in the Zodiac's handwriting, but she believed that these messages look like the Zodiac's handwriting. And again, it was either a note passed to someone or a note passed to a coworker that was given to her. She doesn't know where the murder map came from, but let's talk about these consistencies real quick. So aside from the backwards Y between these two messages, it looks to me that this this is a persona somebody is trying to play and put on. And then as I go through the messages, we start to find the capital A's, the capital F's, the capital L's, all in the middle of lowercase printing, while the astrology reading tends to be more strict lowercase print with proper capitalization. We do see in the word "lookout" a capital L, but that is really the only capital that I saw that was out of place in here. When I did the cross comparison between the actual murder map itself and these particular ones, we found the capital A's, we found the capital R's, we found, let's see, capital N's, capital L's. So again, we're finding now these cross references between these two communications. So basically different significant characteristics between these three kind of tie them all together and suggest that they were written by one person. In the word Vallejo, we've got double capital L's there. So now down here, when we're looking at this handwriting at the bottom, this is actually Sandy Betts' handwriting. And I about fell out of my chair because I did not know how it was going to play out, even though I had saw some things early on, like these capital letter F's that right here in the word "different." Very, very consistent with the capital letter F's that are found in this message up here that says, "Why am I afraid to tell you who I am?" And I mean, so stinking similar that even the way they're formed, the way that the top crossbar comes back below the actual top of the stem, kind of almost in a V shape or a K-like formation on that F, is very consistent with what we see in her handwriting. We also find in her handwriting capital L's, capital R's, capital N's, capital, let's see here, L, R, N, R, L, F's. And F's are really a big one for me here, folks, because capital F's are not something that I've seen in the middle of lowercase printing. I've seen A's, I've seen R's, I've seen D's, I've seen N's, I've seen M's. Capital F in the middle of lowercase printing is completely almost like a solid identifier for somebody. If I saw this in a writing and I was being asked to determine whether or not somebody had executed a document and found these F's in there, I would, this might be enough to sell me all by itself just because of how unique it is. So aside from that, We also look at the word Vallejo. Now, this is the word Vallejo on the map, and this is the word Vallejo in Sandy's handwriting. And I took note to the actual baseline of the letters. So the V starts out at one position, the A hops up, the L's hop up, the E hops up, the J hops up. And when we looked over here at the Vallejo that was actually written on the murder map, we've got a V that's lower, the A that hops up, the L's that hop up, and we have a straight tail J, which is exactly what we see in her handwriting as well. The L's were all consistent. The N's, actually, I mean, even when you look at the formation and the shape of the letter N's in Danville and San Ramon, are consistent with her letter N's. Now, another thing that kind of drew it all back together for me was that Sandy uses a 3-hump M, and it's cursive in nature, written in the middle of printed writing. There's another huge key identifier because not many people do this, let alone even do 3 humps in cursive writing. So when I looked back and saw the "Why am I afraid to tell you who I am?", lo and behold, we have 3-hump cursive written M's in the middle of that message. So now I am extremely, if not upset that I have wasted any time in this particular notion that she is being threatened by somebody. How is it that they can write like her? How is it that they form letters like her, use the same type of capital letters? They're just not. Nobody's sitting around working on trying to mimic Sandy Betts' handwriting in order to make it look like she wrote this while threatening her. Doesn't make any sense in my brain. So we've got some things to look at there. I think I have some more on the writing. Oh, yes, we discussed the formation of the actual zodiac sign itself. And we can see here that this, the crossbars of the zodiac symbol does not go through the actual circle. And lo and behold, that is exactly how Sandy Betts does it as well. So again, there was another home run hit on the formation. We can see this is something she claims that somebody had left, I think for one of her coworkers, or he had claimed he was trying to help her in her zodiac pursuit. And when I got into here, of course, I did see some other things that were consistent with the previous letters that we just looked at. Let me see if I worked up any. Oh, yes, I did work up on that one. So some of the things that I was seeing was this uptick that happens at the bottom left-hand side of the stems of things like T's and H's. You can see it happening over and over again inside of here. And one of the things that we saw in the murder map itself was, again, this leftward tick that happens at the bottom of the T's, and then this crisscross star-shaped T, where it's basically done in one clean fluid movement, which is to draw from the top of the stem downward, exit off to the left, but not pick up the pen, and then cross to the right with the crossbar on the T. And that happened in Sacramento. It happened in Santa Rosa. And then, of course, when we got into Sandy's handwriting, we found it everywhere, this crisscross T that is shaped like a star, basically. And you can find it in much of her handwriting. So I think that that's a clue pushing it back into that notion that there's a possibility that she was creating these. She was attempting to make them look like they were zodiac written, even though I find that there are lots of differences and reasons to believe that they are not. Either way, that's too close to home for me for somebody to complain to having been terrorized by people, or somebody stalking her with this information, when in reality there's just so many commonalities with her own handwriting that we have to question whether or not that she has been honest with us. Here's another cross-reference of that same Robert Graysmith note and document, in which case I pulled apart even more items that are linked by virtue of those backwards Y's, the capital L's, the actual word "the" and the shape of the H's are very consistent with her handwriting as well. It just goes on. And sometimes when you have the right suspect for a handwriting, you could continue making those matches all day long. I felt that this was significant enough for me to kind of drop this notion that this came from the Zodiac, number one, because it's not a match to his handwriting. And number two, it does not match any of the suspects she claims to have been involved with her being terrorized. And number three, there are so many consistencies with her handwriting that I'm pretty much going to 86 this notion altogether. What do you think, Harriet?
Oh, I sure would love to hear explanation on all of this, but
Me too.
But some of the things, yeah, I think you would say that some of the stuff on our maps are matching, but we need to hear some explanations as to why this is happening.
Well, and I had offered her within the last couple weeks to come back on the show. Like I said, she's now adopted the thought process of some new suspect out there that might possibly have some bearing on what it is that she's doing and looking at. And she felt compelled to deal with them before actually coming on the show. So this is going to play out the way it plays out without her, because I offered her to come in.
Yeah.
I don't know how she would have handled this kind of information. She may have gotten mad. I don't know. I did actually have one more slide where I looked at the letter P as it pertains to the Robert Graysmith letter that she supposedly got. And the P's have these little flags that are sticking up to the top left-hand side here. And even the shapes of the bowls are similar. They don't close back to the actual stem, but we see that in her P's in her own writing, once again, have that flag that sticks out just kind of curved off to the left just a little bit. But again, just another consistency. Too much for me anyways. All right. I'm done with my rant, and I did finally get that handwriting done for everybody. Robert Hernandez is not a match. Richard Gaikowski is not a match. And unfortunately, there are far too many commonalities with Sandy Betts' handwriting for me to dismiss that this was somebody else actively trying to terrorize her, and that it is likely she is the one that actually constructed and created that map and possibly the other letters as well. So that brings us back to the murderers. And I think we actually had started to talk about these ones last time. We had Heidi Villarreal Fye, which you had commented on, believing it was Robert Abel, you thought was the murderer.
Yeah. And I have my books that I could look at here, but anyways, yeah, I had a hard time pronouncing her name too, but as I went along, so my God, she's another victim of Robert Abel, who couldn't get help, and even admitted over the years that, to other people that he kind of needed help for some things. And, of course, he didn't tell all his friends, well, I'm a killer, butcher your children. But,
So you believe he was back and forth? You believe he was back and forth between California and Texas committing murders?
Yeah, I have him linked to, Gidley, Patricia Gidley, and I had to look into that one. I said, how could he be linked there? The wedding that she was going to had to do with Bracewell, a very famous NASA person, the Bracewell Observatory at Stanford, and apparently he went to that wedding, and they had some kind of date, but I guess she reminded him of Janis Joplin. But Patricia Gidley, was extremely smart, really intelligent. She was involved with West Coast NORAD. So she did imaging and things like that. I mean, it's really 23 years old in the mind of a 50-year-old scientist. It's sad that she was killed, but yeah, but maybe that was also it. She had a mind like a scientist, and he didn't want to deal with that. I don't know. Things would trigger him. But
well,
yeah,
I think they indicated she went missing October 1st of 1983. Were you able to lock that in as far as the wedding date was concerned?
I believe so. And hold on a second. Well, yeah. So she went missing, and I think there was another witness that saw what happened, and that's a future event where somebody else went missing in that same area in 1984. So that convenience store location.
Well, it did say that she went to use the payphone at League City convenience store, and that's where she was abducted from. So she didn't quite make it to California, is what I'm getting.
Oh no, she didn't make it to California, but Robert Abel was pretty active. And, a mess.
So it says that she was beaten to death with a club and broken bones found in the killing fields where Miller and two Jane Does were found. So obviously the suspect is returning to bury bodies where others have been buried. I know that Jack has just requested a divorce on October 20th of 1983. However, this predates she went missing. Obviously, they say October 1st, so that predates it. It doesn't mean that Jack isn't there, because again, he is just now coming off an arrest. He is having to get his affairs in order before he turns himself in, and he does, I believe, 30 days in jail. So Jack always returns home, guys, every single time. Whenever anything is going on while he's waiting to enter the military, I'd say a few times a year, probably, mostly holidays, he'd return home to mom. But he was back and forth to Texas on a constant basis. On October 3rd of 1983, it says, "You got my first." It's a letter postmarked Kalamazoo, Michigan. I know that we put in here to research this. Now that you're at home, maybe we can start looking up this particular letter and see if there's any instances or versions of it out there.
And let me look at that.
Right.
It was driving me crazy the last couple of days. I said I was trying to find it. So anyways, yeah, send it, whatever.
Oh, I don't have it. It's in the FOIA files. It's listed as a letter that was examined. Okay. I'll send that out to you. On October 26th, 6 days after Jack requests divorce, we have Sandra Rambler in Santa Fe, Texas, goes missing. She was abducted on her way to the store. So a lot of these convenience stores, little stores. I mean, if we go all the way back to Sherry Joe Bates, the suspect mentions taking people from little stores. So, that rolls us right down into November 2nd of 1983 on the Corvette Concepts murders in Texas. I believe we did start to talk about this a bit because it is actually notated in Tim Miller's letter. We can see the envelope portion of it over here that is addressed to Tom Humble. And there's a lot of things that I found were consistent and intertwined with this, because there is talk about Humble, Texas in this particular letter in lieu of Superfudge, which is a very interesting tie-in, we believe, between anthrax and this letter where he's taking I believe he was taking ultimate responsibility for all of these different crime sprees across the United States. However, Harriet, you believe that he was telling on people who were actually doing it, but this one letter does really encompass everything from the Zodiac Killer to the Phantoms to the Corvette Concepts fiasco mystery, the Zodiac Killer. I mean, there's just so many different references inside this letter. Now, this one was actually, it stated that the return address was, I believe, it looks like 6 or 595 West Main League, City, Texas, 77573, and it mentions Corvette Concepts fiasco mystery. And of course, that brings us to the Corvette Concepts murders, where 3 individuals were actually murdered: Beth Wilburn, Thomas McGraw, and James Oates. Beth was stabbed 129 times, and in addition to being shot, McGraw was shot and stabbed 15 times, and a sharpened screwdriver was embedded in his spine. It does not indicate how James Oates was killed, at least by this particular information that I have. It does indicate they've made an arrest at one point in time, though I don't have the date on it. That must have fell through, and that person must not have been able to be charged or convicted of the crime, because in 2021, we have an article that comes out saying Corvette and Cash offered for answers in cold case murder. So they are still looking for a suspect in this, and I think that the author of this letter to Tim Miller in regards to his daughter is probably the direction they should be looking in. Do you have anything to add to that on the Corvette Concepts?
Well, I think they did get somebody, but I was looking to see if I had anything printed about all this, and I think these are 2 books that have not been printed yet by me. So because I done, for some reason, a lot of detail on what ended up being the Corvette Concepts and the description of the evidence and stuff. So Jack definitely had the information about what happened with this. And so the only thing I can add is that I'll have to look up what I have and just kind of go over it again. It's just I think that's why he was calling it a fiasco, because the detectives there, even though a lot of them are good and, honest people, there's still people who want to cover up things in the past that are linked to other people that are connected to certain people. And, I've seen the dirtiness of John Edward Walsh Jr. So anything that seems to be connected to that, because he's supposed to be a good guy on that show. Anyways, I can go on and on, but that's why it was called the fiasco. It's just how they handled it, the evidence, 118 times,
Yeah. No, and I get that
being
because that's
said,
kind of Zodiac 101 to call them out on their ineptness. Whenever he finds that the police is not appropriately handling things, he likes to actually give a shout out. So calling it a fiasco would not surprise me. What does surprise me is that this is a little bit off the MO of what we're seeing with the other females that are happening in Texas. This is, walking into a place of business. This is wiping out everybody who happens to be in there. I don't believe that they mentioned anything in regards to, robbery or anybody taking any money, but this is definitely overkill and meant to be personal. I mean, if you're going to leave a sharpened screwdriver embedded in somebody's spine and you're not going to take that murder weapon with you, you're sending a message. You stab somebody 129 times and shoot them, you're sending a message. So what were these individuals into? And you have to think that, somebody owning a Corvette dealership is probably pretty high up there as far as money is concerned. All right.
Drugs. I think drugs plays a key role in that. Somebody knew something, saw something. Yeah. And
that was kind of where my head was going, but I don't know that to be true, so it wasn't something I was going to mention. Obviously, we've got victims here, and we don't want to throw any more shade on them than they have already. But there's a possibility. I mean, we've heard Tim Miller discuss what he was doing at the time his daughter was taken. We've heard you and Lindsay McBray talk about John Walsh and what he was in the middle of at the time his son was taken. There is some type of a commonality that is coming back to those types of events. I do have on here that I believe that Jack probably turned himself in after November 2nd, whereby he is released on November 1st for his 30 days. It's also contention that Jack would have gone home to Texas, as I had stated, while going through the divorce with Nora. Even though we are showing an address in Rio Linda, we see addresses for Jack all over the place. I mean, he is still currently holding P.O. boxes in Texas at this time. He's holding P.O. boxes in Oklahoma at this time. Like, he has virtually many addresses that could be tied to him during this particular period. November 14th of 1983, 25-year-old Stanley Lang Common on Highway 59 in North Park Drive in Kingwood, Texas. It says on November 13th, 1983 at approximately 10 p.m., victim Stanley Lang Common left his residence on Ashmore Street in Houston, Texas, telling his girlfriend that he was restless and was going out. On November 14th, 1983, at approximately 8 a.m., an employee working on fire hydrant drains found the dead body of Common lying in a partially cleared field off North Park Drive at Highway 59 in Kingwood, Texas. He had been shot multiple times and his car was missing. Common's vehicle was subsequently found parked in the 1000 block of Webster Street in Houston. The car had been at that location since December 5th, 1983, at which time a parking ticket had been issued. And again, this goes back to the cars that go missing. So we've got the victim that is killed and we've got the car that is moved to another location and subsequently found. Now, I show that this is the last unsolved murder for almost 7 months. And we do see that, again, Jack is going to go to jail and he is going to be on probation for quite some time. But Texas is going to be free, at least as far as my research is concerned. If there are more murders out there, then please send them through. I have looked up on the website for Texas and unsolved killings, and it does not show any other unsolved murders for this time period either.
Well, I know you mentioned about Webster Street and the position and how much, there was X amount of shots. And I'm just wondering if that person was a witness to what happened with Joan Webster. That's how my mind thinks, because there was somebody who witnessed Joan Webster getting into a vehicle and I'm saying Jack somehow knew all this information and they were allegedly trying to get her attention to not go into that vehicle. So, and that's what I'm seeing, that it does look like it was Robert Abel again. And the witness, the composite fits Robert Abel to a T, including the beard. So again, was this somebody that they're trying to leave some information and that's how I'm seeing this, Did they see something with what happened with Joan Webster? So, again, we got NASA, a whole bunch of things going on there. The International Telephone and Telegraph Company, huge, that has something.
So where was Joan Webster? We've already discussed her then. She's already been killed. I get myself confused with all of these victims.
Yeah. Well, there was somebody who witnessed her getting into that car. So, and then Robert Abel, who's usually in Texas, was back there. So,
right. And that's plausible, because we have seen the use of street names as it pertains to different victims, such as Black Dahlia and Susan Degnan on Hollywood Boulevard and Degnan Boulevard in those murders. So yeah, you're not far behind what we know to be a typical MO for these crimes. I had already read that one, so we're just going to hop on into Jack's probation. So on December 1st, 1983, Jack is signing probation documents, but there's no time frame given for how long in these particular documents. Jack is paying his fines for the crimes December 1st, 1983 in Sacramento, California. So he obviously is no longer in prison at this point, and we start to see him freely moving around again. They did give him an orientation that was completed at the probation office on December 2nd, 1983 in Sacramento, California. So once again, we know he is out because he is now attending probation appointments, that is. On December 7th of 1983, Jack receives the interlocutory judgment for the divorce from Nora. For now, Jack lists his home address for the divorce as 2135 Elkhorn Boulevard, Rio Linda, California, 95673. Only in this particular paperwork and on his probation paperwork do we see that listed. I don't know that that necessarily means that Jack is actively living there, but I am betting that he probably had to play or pretend he was living somewhere in the Sacramento area, at least for the purpose of probation. But that doesn't stop people from going places where they shouldn't be going and leaving the state and doing what they want to do, as we've seen many people actively do, even though they were on probation. I also already read that one. And that brings us to May 22nd of 1984. The divorce is final from Nora, Mary Terrence, and Jack is still showing an address in Rio Linda as his place of residence. Nora is actively showing Garfield Avenue in Sacramento, California at this point in time, and this was confirmed through Ancestry.com. And I want to say that was probably done by Sandy Betts. She's done some great research. She's, even assisted in plotting out where Jack is and what he has going on in some of the things that we've done together. So it saddens me to see what I'm seeing, that I might have to discount a lot of what has been done there. Maybe why we see the next murder start up is because we've got this triggering point again. And it seems like every time we have this triggering point, we start to see murders happen again. And the FBI will tell you that usually there is something that triggers a person to need to kill. Maybe it's just idle hands. Maybe it's the, anger coming from the actual act of the divorce. I'm not sure, but Dennis indicates that not only did Jack make and distribute methamphetamines during this time, but he frequently drove to Oklahoma, as we just discussed about the P.O. boxes during the 80s, to pick up marijuana for distribution. And who knows if it was just marijuana? I mean, it seems like a long way to go to pick up marijuana when people in California have been growing it for years and years and years, and then have to drive back with that. So I'm wondering if it wasn't something a little bit stiffer like cocaine or methamphetamines. But then Dennis did indicate that Jack knew how to actively make his own methamphetamines, so probably didn't need to drive to pick those up either. Well, that puts us back down to our very last minute, and that's before we start jumping back into murders in Texas again. So I'm going to kind of end it there. Is there anything you would like to add, Harriet?
Well, you reminded me that methamphetamines was legal and in the Army up until 1989. So, can you hear me okay? Anyways, I'm just saying that
I think we have.
Yeah, because maybe that's why he was continuing.
You can hear? I can't hear.
Oh, never mind. Okay. Anyways, have a great weekend, everybody.
I don't hear anything.
Okay. Well, we love you, Nanette. Thank you.
Wonder what has happened here. Oops. lost my sound. I've lost my sound at this point. I cannot hear. Can you hear me? All right. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and just have to sign off with everybody right now. Thank you for being here once again. Another amazing show. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Happy Easter to you all, and we will see you next Friday. Take care. Oh,